Chapter 1, Scene 1, The Pulse of Time. Brooklyn Heights, 6:17 a.m. The cold breath of November lingered in the narrow streets, clinging to the stone walls. The city seemed trapped between light and darkness. Sleep still hung over the city, a fragile, uneasy calm. Sherwin Holtz opened his eyes, and the steady ticking of his pocket watch echoed in the dimly lit room. Tick, tock. He looked at the books on the shelves, the papers filled with notes, and the objects on the desk that bore traces of his life. In the center stood a clock, gold-plated, meticulously repaired, a silent guardian of memories. The scent of coffee reached his nose. It was familiar. He took a deep breath. His inner voice rose. Time is not a line. It beats like a pulse. As it beats, it keeps memories alive. As it stops, it buries them. The door opened slightly. Maggie entered. The fatigue on her face had turned into a graceful habit. Her eyes were still young. Maggie, I guess time woke you up again. Holtz. Sleep can't always silence time, Maggie. Has the coffee arrived? Maggie approached with a brass tray. Fresh Colombian beans. Brooklyn is waking up to a harsh morning today. Don't forget your coat. Holtz approached the window. A crow was perched on the opposite roof. It wasn't looking at the sky, but rather into the past. He turned back to the table. He opened the watch's case. As he traced the gears inside with his fingers, he whispered, "Time holds secrets. Each gear is a memory, each spring a confession." He looked at the old photograph on the table. The face of a young woman seemed faded. On the back, a single sentence. "When the clock turns backward, you'll find me." Next to it was an old train ticket. The date had been erased, but the traces of time were still visible. Sometimes the past isn't a clue, it's a mirror, he thought to himself. As Maggie returned to the kitchen, Holtz was left alone. The room fell silent. Tick, tock. Time had begun to speak again. Scene 2, Unexpected Call. Holtz placed his pocket watch on the table. The room was almost completely silent. Only the ticking of the clock could be heard. A familiar, steady, almost patient rhythm. He took another sip of his coffee. The taste lingering on his tongue transformed into an echo intertwined with the past in his mind. He flipped through the old notebook on the table. There was a sense of forgotten time between the pages. But at that moment, the deep silence of the room was shattered by a ringing sound. The bell rang. The black, heavy-bodied phone in the corner vibrated. The sound echoed off the stone walls. Holtz startled, but when he reached out, he did not hesitate. As he lifted the receiver, only one sentence crossed his mind. This sound could be the call of time. The voice on the other end was female. Calm but clear, firm but unhurried. Voice. "Mr. Holtz, this is Detective Amanda Gray. We have an emergency. We need your help." Holtz's gaze sharpened. The voice was unfamiliar, but the tone was familiar. The seriousness went beyond the words. "Holtz, what happened?" Detective Gray. "Last night, near Brooklyn, the old clockmaker Mendel Klein was found dead in his shop. The crime scene is unusual. Not a clear-cut murder, not an ordinary death. There are strange clues related to clocks. We can't make sense of it. But I thought this might interest you." Klein? The name rang a bell in Holtz's mind. A distant memory, a hazy recollection. "Holtz, I'm on it. I'll be there in half an hour." He hung up the phone. His eyes fell on a train ticket lying on the corner of the desk. There was a faint inscription on the edge that he hadn't noticed before. "Find the time, and the secret will find you." He opened his wardrobe. He put on his long coat, fastened his belt. He paused for a moment. He looked at the clock. The hour and minute hands were almost overlapping, as if they were waiting for time. He left a small note on the table for Maggie. "An emergency. I might be late. Time, it's calling me again." He closed the door quietly. Only the sound of the clock remained in the apartment. Tick, tock, tick, tock. The morning in Brooklyn was cold. The air felt like invisible needles piercing his skin. As Holtz walked along the sidewalk, the echo of his footsteps was as lonely as he was. Now, only one word kept circling in his mind. Mystery. Scene 3. First impressions at the scene. It was still early morning in Brooklyn. Fog covered the streets and a gray silence had settled over the stone sidewalks. Holtz made his way through the narrow streets. His footsteps echoed softly, and the air still felt like night. Mendel Klein's clock workshop was on the ground floor of a small building. The door was ajar. The faded sign still read, "Klein's time, every clock has a memory." Holtz stopped. He took a deep breath. He stepped inside. The air inside was heavy. The scent of oil, metal, and old wood mingled together. The workshop was cluttered, but the clutter was not random. It seemed arranged as if seeking meaning. Various pocket watches on the walls, screwdrivers on the tables, scattered notes, unfinished repairs. But everything was in its place. It seemed untouched. The floor was striking. The dust wasn't evenly distributed. In some places, there were circular marks, lines, shapes resembling symbols. Holtz bent down. He ran his finger over the floor. This is a deliberate mark, he thought to himself. A sign left by someone who speaks with time. A broken pocket watch on the table caught his eye. The glass was cracked. The hour and minute hands seemed to be stuck together. The clock had stopped, but the way it had stopped, it seemed more deliberate than natural. He picked up the watch. The cold metal left an odd weight on his skin. He opened the case. The inner mechanism was in disarray, but it seemed to have been damaged in a specific pattern. A small burned piece of paper fell out, almost completely gone. At that moment, a sound came from the back door. The hinges creaked. Holtz turned his head. A tall, dark-haired woman entered. The badge on her jacket collar glinted. Brooklyn Detective Amanda Gray. Amanda. "Mr. Holtz, welcome. I know these kinds of calls aren't pleasant, but this isn't an ordinary death. We figured that out right away." His eyes were still on the workshop. "Holtz, what did you find?" "Amanda, the body was found early this morning. No signs of a struggle. Hands at his sides, eyes open. Nothing was disturbed except for the broken clock on the table. Nothing was stolen. And this clock seems to be telling us something. The police couldn't figure it out, but I thought maybe you could." Holtz shook his head. His gaze wandered over the dim corners of the workshop. Everything was silent, but this was no ordinary silence. Time has stopped here, he thought to himself. But the real question is, who stopped it? And the ticking of the pocket watch was no longer an echo, but a warning. The mystery was just beginning. Scene 4. The secret of the watch. Holtz turned back to the table. He picked up the broken pocket watch he had been examining earlier. Amanda stood silently behind him, watching his movements carefully. He slowly turned the back cover of the watch. The rusty hinges creaked. On the inner surface, there were 2 letters that were fading but still legible. S. H. Holtz's eyes froze. As he looked at the initials, something stirred inside him. A familiar chill pierced his heart. This was no coincidence. Holtz, to himself. "My initials," Amanda noticed. "Amanda, do you recognize this watch?" Holtz shook his head slightly. "Holtz, no, I don't think so. But somehow it feels like it belongs to me." His voice was hoarse. The words bounced off the unknown layers of his mind and changed direction. He opened the inner mechanism. One of the gears was different from the others. It reflected the light differently. A thin notch had been carefully carved into it, as if it were a path to be followed. Holtz, whispering, "Clocks don't measure time. They preserve memories." He took out his magnifying glass from his pocket. A sentence engraved in tiny letters on the inner surface of the clock became visible. "If the keeper distorts time, Order is lost forever. Amanda took a step closer. Holtz's eyes were still fixed on the magnifying glass. Amanda, is this a warning? Holtz, perhaps an oath, perhaps a reminder. An old memory flashed before his eyes. A gray stone street, a child holding a watch. That child might have been Holtz, or perhaps someone who came before him. As Holtz closed the watch, his inner voice whispered again, the past doesn't just stay behind. Sometimes it stares back at you from inside a forgotten watch. Amanda looked at his face silently. Her voice was softer this time. Amanda, this watch is telling you something, isn't it? Holtz nodded. Holtz, I don't know what it is yet, but there's one thing I'm certain of. This isn't just a death. This is the trace of something that disrupts time. Amanda took a deep breath. Amanda, then we have to find it. Holtz put the watch in his pocket. His eyes drifted out the window to the misty streets. The watch was no longer just an object. It was a door to the past, to identity, and perhaps much more. Scene 5, mysterious messages and inner questioning. Holtz carefully opened Mendel Klein's notebook. The cover was worn, the pages yellowed. Inside was a reflection of a mind in turmoil. Drawings, notes, symbols, words in unknown languages. It was as if he were looking into the mind of someone lost in time. He turned the pages slowly. Every line had a crack, every symbol an echo. Amanda stood behind him, watching silently. Amanda, can you make sense of it? Holtz, partly. Some of the symbols are familiar. They appear in ancient texts related to time rituals, but the ones used here are more personal. Klein was trying to figure something out, and I think he did it not with his mind, but with his past. On one page was a drawing of a circular clock. In the center were interlocking gears. A handwritten note was scribbled on the edge. Time is not linear. Each repetition is a knot. Each knot is a code. Holtz's eyes lingered on the words. They were like the fingerprints of a fragmented mind. On another page, a single word was written in the center of circular symbols. Halcyon. A bell rang in Holtz's mind. He had heard this word before. Years ago, in an unsolved case, in the notebook of a forgotten clockmaker. And now it was before him again. Holtz, muttering, the same word again, the same shadow again. Amanda leaned over another page. Equation-like shapes, some resembling time loops. Amanda, this isn't just a watchmaker's notes. This is an obsession with the structure of time. Holtz nodded. Holtz, Klein wasn't just a watchmaker. He was a researcher trying to understand time, and even change it. Toward the end of the notebook, a map fragment emerged. The city's silhouette was drawn, with some areas circled. Above it was an inscription, Third Circle, Halcyon. Amanda narrowed her eyes. Amanda? Could this be a place? Or some kind of societal structure? Holtz approached the window. His eyes roamed over the city, disappearing into the mist. Time is no longer just in clocks. It's hidden in maps, names, and the traces of the past. And at that moment, a piercing scream was heard from outside. Holtz's gaze sharpened. Amanda quickly reached for her gun. Both of them reflexively headed toward the door. Holtz, this isn't a warning, it's a call. Their eyes met. Now, both of them knew. This wasn't just a murder case. A knot from within time was waiting to be untangled. Scene 6. Shadow falling on the night. The street was no longer quiet. That shrill scream echoed like a knife plunged deep into its heart. Holtz rushed out of the workshop, Amanda close behind. Under the hazy light of the street lamps, their footsteps echoed on the stone pavement. The scream had come from a few buildings away. The fog had thickened. It had almost settled around them like a wall. Holtz tensed. A shadow moved in the darkness. It was brief but distinct. Holtz in a low voice. There was someone there. Amanda pulled out her radio. She reported to headquarters. Amanda, scream received, proceeding to the scene, reinforcements requested. The two continued walking quickly. The street resembled an abandoned fairy tale scene. Every window, every door seemed to be watching them. The entrance door of a building was slightly ajar. It creaked in the wind. Holtz approached and pushed it open with his hand. The door swung inward. An empty, abandoned warehouse. The shelves were rusty, the floor covered in dust. But there were fresh footprints on the ground. Someone had been there recently. Amanda whispering, "Fresh tracks. Someone is watching us." Holtz followed the tracks. As he passed between the shelves, he saw scattered clock parts, metal gears, and pieces of paper with writing carved into them. Amanda picked up a piece of paper from the floor. It had a familiar symbol on it, 3 interlocking rings with an eye in the center. Amanda, the same symbol again. Halcyon. Holtz approached. He examined the paper. There was a short message beneath it. Those who protect time are watched. Be careful. S. H. Holtz's eyes grew serious. Holtz. This isn't a warning. This is a message, and it's addressed directly to me. Just then, the small window on the back wall of the building suddenly opened. A shadow slipped out. Amanda aimed her gun, but the target had already vanished into the fog. Holtz approached the window. Below, the echo of quick footsteps could be heard. Holtz. They're watching us. But it's not just that. They're guiding us. Amanda. What do we do? Holtz. This isn't just the beginning of a murder. It's the start of a game being played across time. Every second is now leaving a trail. When they stepped outside, the street had fallen silent again. But Holtz knew this wasn't an ordinary day. Today, something had begun. Born from the darkness of time itself. Scene 7. In the depths of time, Holtz stood at the door of Klein's workshop. The sky was still gray. Amanda was a few steps behind him. Neither of them spoke. It was now dark. Evening had fallen. Holtz, whispering, "We missed something. We had to come back here." They slowly opened the door. As they stepped inside, they felt as though time had reversed. The silence was even thicker now. The clocks had fallen silent. Only the wind crept in through the broken windows, swirling around the edges of the room like whispers. Holtz lit his lantern. The light fell on the rusty clocks on the shelves, the gilded but stopped table clocks. Everything had borne witness to time, but now lay silent. Holtz. This place isn't silent. It's just waiting for the right time to speak. They headed toward the work corner. Holtz bent over Mendel Klein's desk. One of the floorboards was different. When he stepped on it, it made a hollow sound. He knelt down and examined it carefully. He lifted the piece of wood with pliers from the edge. A small, hidden compartment appeared underneath. Amanda opened her eyes. Amanda? How did you notice? Holtz. I couldn't hear it when we first arrived. Now, I know the sound. A small velvet-lined box emerged from the compartment. Holtz opened it slowly. Its contents were like doors opening to the past. An old pocket photo. 3 men. One was Mendel Klein. The other 2 looked familiar, but it wasn't clear. A small letter. If time breaks, remember the one who repairs it. Code. Halcyon. A rusty key. The tip was curved, and there were 3 interlocking rings at the top. A thin metal plate at the bottom of the box. SH, among those who hold time. A shiver ran through Holtz as his fingers touched the inscription. Amanda. It's like part of a society, or a sworn group. Holtz glanced at the letter. There was a date on the back, 1899. Amanda, surprised. Over a century old. This could be something much deeper than we thought. Holtz's gaze fixed on the box. It wasn't just a clue. It felt like a personal call. Holtz, quietly. This isn't just a murder. This is A war between those who seek to control time. The workshop's silence was no longer empty. In that moment, Holtz understood this case wasn't about solving time, but about confronting it. Scene 8. The Echo of Time. Holtz held the letter that had come out of the box in his hand. The paper was yellowed, the edges torn. The words on the surface were faded, but still clung on, as if time had dared not touch these lines. He opened it slowly. Each word seemed to echo from the past to the present. S.H. Among those who hold time. Wait for the right time. Let the sound of the clock be your guide. Halcyon's light will find its way in the darkness. Amanda stood beside him. She read silently. Amanda. This is like a prophecy. Holtz's face was thoughtful. He didn't respond. His eyes drifted to the corners of the lines. He pulled out his magnifying glass from his pocket and held the light to the paper. A hidden seal became visible. Halcyon Society, third circle. Holtz to himself. The third circle. Halcyon's innermost circle. The place where the most secrets are kept. Amanda approached cautiously. Amanda. This Halcyon Society, does it really exist? Or is it just a legend? Holtz. It was told like a legend. But the clues were always there. Symbols, lost hours, erased names. Now, everything is coming together. And Klein knew this. Maybe that's why he was killed. Just then, a sound came from the back door. The wood creaked. Amanda drew her gun. Holtz turned his eyes toward the darkness. They took a few steps inside. On the floor between the shelves lay a small clock mechanism. Holtz picked it up. There was a familiar mark on it. S.H. Amanda took a step back. Amanda, that's your mark. Someone deliberately left it here. Holtz's voice grew quieter. Holtz, this is a message, but it's not just a clue. It's a direction. The air grew heavy between the shelves. There was no sound of clocks, but it felt as though there was a breath of time behind the walls. Holtz, inner voice. This isn't just a murder. This is a carefully designed memory game. He paused for a moment. Then he broke the silence. Holtz, we need someone for this job. An old friend. Amanda turned. Amanda. Who? Holtz. John Harrow. We work together on cases involving time. If he's still in the business, he could help us. Amanda. Can you trust him? Holtz. I know him from my past. And this job, it's taking me back to my past. He looked out the window. The darkness was beginning to envelop time. Scene 9. Unexpected collaboration and S.H. secret. The rain that fell incessantly throughout the night had turned Brooklyn's cobblestone streets into mirrors. The flickering reflections of the street lamps danced on the surface like dreams from the past. Holtz and Amanda got out of the taxi together. There was one more person with them, Jonas Weston, an old friend, an analytical mind. As Holtz put it, the man whose mind works like a clock. The three of them stood in front of an old building. This was Jonas's workshop, a time archive filled with books, maps, clock parts, and forgotten documents. When they entered, Jonas carefully unwrapped the pocket watch, which was wrapped in heavy fabric. Holtz spoke softly. Holtz. We found this watch in Klein's workshop, but it feels like it belongs to me. Amanda added, Amanda? There are the letters S.H. on the back, Holtz's initials. But is this just a coincidence? We're not sure. Jonas took out his magnifying glass and examined the mechanism. As his eyes scanned the watch, he murmured, Jonas, this isn't an ordinary watch. It's a key that holds time. Holtz listened silently to the ticking of the watch. Holtz, I'm certain there's a connection here, perhaps an echo of something I was part of years ago. Jonas looked up. Jonas, there are halcyon symbols in the clock structure. This device wasn't made just to measure time, to guide, perhaps to protect. Amanda leaned forward slightly. Amanda, Why was Klein hiding this clock? And why is SH inside it? Holtz's voice was slow but firm. Holtz, perhaps this clock wasn't Klein's. It was my past. Jonas glanced at the notebook and the letter. Jonas, the code here pertains to Halcyon's inner structure. There's a term called third circle. This could be the most secretive circle of society. Amanda fixed her eyes on Jonas. Amanda. So this watch might contain Halcyon's secrets? Jonas. And the person hiding them might be Holtz himself. Holtz took the watch back into his hands, as if the device were reminding him it belonged to him. Holtz. Perhaps this watch is calling me back to the depths of the past. Jonas smiled. Jonas. It's like a game, but we won't follow the rules, we'll follow time. Amanda. Can you figure out the details inside? Jonas. It might take a few hours. I need to go to my back workshop. I can't say for sure without examining the mechanism in detail. Holtz nodded. Holtz. Let's review Halcyon's records in the meantime. Every detail matters now. As the night progressed, the three began working in silence. Each had crossed paths with this mysterious clock through their own pasts, and none of them were the same people anymore. Scene 10. Return to the clock shop and new clues. The night had stopped, but the air was still damp. The smell of rain clinging to Brooklyn's stone walls felt like a warning from the past. Holtz, Amanda, and Jonas returned to Mendel Klein's clock shop at this late hour, nearing dawn. Holtz's steps were slow but determined. His mind was already inside. Holtz, inner voice. Sometimes you have to return to solve a mystery, because time doesn't reveal everything on the first try. When they reached the door, the sign was still there. Klein's time, but it looked more worn now, as if it had cracked under the weight of the secret it had carried for years. Amanda turned the old key. The door creaked open. They stepped inside. Dim light danced across the shelves. The air was still, but this time there was a different kind of silence, something waiting in the darkness. Holtz walked straight to a painting hanging on the wall that they hadn't noticed on their previous visits. The frame was slightly charred. As he played with the light, he noticed raised marks on the surface. There was a hidden detail beneath the dust. Holtz ran his finger over the surface. As the light shifted, 2 letters appeared. S.H. Jonas approached silently. Jonas. This can't be a coincidence. The same mark is everywhere. Holtz. This isn't a map. This is a guided route, built step by step. Amanda found a piece of fabric partially covered on the ground. When she lifted it, an envelope was wedged between the fabric and the ground. On the envelope was a single sentence. When the clock strikes midnight, the real door opens. Holtz took the envelope. The ink had faded, but the message was clear. Holtz. It could be symbolic, but it's connected to the clock. Something triggers at midnight. Jonas turned his gaze to the large wall clock in the shop. Jonas. Maybe that clock. The clock appeared to be stopped, but Holtz took out his pocket watch from his pocket. He opened the lid. When he gently placed his watch beneath the wall clock, a click sounded inside. It was as if a lock had been released. Behind the wall, a hidden panel behind the bookshelf shifted slightly. Amanda narrowed her eyes. Amanda. There's something there. Holtz pushed the wall. The panel opened. Inside was a hidden compartment. Parchment documents, city maps, old books, an archive that had survived the passage of time. Jonas examined the documents carefully. Jonas. It belongs to Halcyon. Look, there's even an old membership list here. Amanda opened another notebook. Inside were marked city locations, date stamps, symbols. Amanda. These could be meeting places. Traces of Halcyon. Holtz picked up a notebook. On the cover was written, "Those who wish to change time must first erase memories." At that moment, one of the windows shattered with a loud crash. There was movement outside. Amanda quickly drew her weapon. Jonas put the documents in his bag. Holtz put his pocket watch back in his pocket. Holtz. They've found us. Amanda turned her gaze toward the darkness. Amanda? But we won't leave here until we find what we're looking for. The inside of the store was no longer a store, but a battlefield. Time was silent, but it was waiting in ambush. Scene 11. Shadows of danger and a new ally. When the shop window shattered, time seemed to stand still for a moment. Holtz ducked behind Amanda for cover. Jonas stuffed the documents into his bag as rapid footsteps could be heard outside. There were no guns, but the intention was clear. This was not a warning, but a message. Amanda, they're not attacking, they're trying to scare us. Holtz, or to redirect us. Holtz quickly approached the window. Across the street, in the dim light of the lamp, a silhouette appeared. A man in a long coat and hat. He was like a shadow. He locked eyes with Holtz, then he turned and disappeared. Jonas. Did he look familiar? Holtz. No, but I felt like I did. At that moment, the back door of the shop creaked open. All three of them startled. Amanda raised her gun. Holtz cautiously approached the door. An envelope had been slipped through the crack. He opened it. Inside was a short note. Don't think time flows alone. Sometimes it waits for you. Your old friend is still alive. And beneath it, in shaky handwriting, were just two letters. J.H. Holtz's hand trembled. Jonas looked at him. Jonas. Harrow? Holtz shook his head slowly. Holtz. John Harrow. He disappeared years ago, but there was no evidence he was dead. Amanda turned to Jonas silently. Amanda, who is this person? Jonas. Holtz's old partner. They investigated time-related incidents together, but Harrow suddenly vanished one day. Some said they silenced him. Holtz's eyes were distant. Holtz. If this is his handwriting, he might still have a chance. Jonas looked at the back of the note. There was a small number, 43 degrees 12 minutes north, 73 degrees 16 minutes west. Holtz immediately pulled out an old city map from his pocket. He studied the coordinates. Holtz. It's a library. An abandoned building at the northern end of the city. Amanda. Is Harrow calling us there? Or is this another one of Halcyon's games? Holtz stood up resolutely. Holtz. There's only one way. To go. Jonas placed the documents in his bag. Amanda checked her weapon. The three of them went outside together. The first light of dawn had not yet overcome the shadows, despite the street lamps. Holtz. Time may be moving forward, but some shadows are deeper than the past. Scene 12. Closing. Where time began. Between night and day, the gray line of time had fallen over Brooklyn. This time, the darkness was not coming from the sky, but from the approaching past. When Holtz, Amanda, and Jonas arrived at the abandoned library, it was 1 o'clock in the morning. Holtz's mind drifted back to the past. He had never seen this building before, but every step, every stone felt familiar, as if time had prepared this moment for him long ago. The library was built from large stone blocks. The entrance door was rusty. The stairs were covered in moss, and the words written in ancient alphabets on the walls were beginning to fade. There was a sun-shaped relief on it. The symbol of Halcyon. Amanda fell silent. Jonas took a deep breath. Jonas. Here, it feels like not only knowledge, but also memories are gathering dust. Holtz looked at the pocket watch in his pocket. The clock had stopped, but strangely, he too seemed to have stopped. Time was holding its breath with him. They pushed the door open. The creak echoed through the centuries-old silence. The interior was dark. The windows were broken. The shelves were shattered. But there was still something standing on a table near the center. A small black box. On it was a single symbol. S.H. Holtz approached. The box had no lock. It was simply waiting, not to be opened, but to be remembered. When he opened it, a book fell out. The pages were dark in color. They were not inked, but carved. The first page was blank. The second page read, Time is not linear. Every step is an echo. Every echo is a shadow. And every shadow is a beginning. Amanda quietly came over. Amanda, it's like a holy book, but it wasn't written by a prophet, a timekeeper. Holtz flipped through the pages. Each one contained ancient rituals, formulas in unknown languages, coordinates, some names erased. And he stopped at one point. What caught his eye was a photograph. 3 people. One was Mendel Klein. Another was a woman he didn't recognize. And the third, John Harrow. But a younger version of him, from the 1980s it seemed. On the back, a single word was carved. Don't forget. Holtz looked up. His eyes stared into the void. I have a past I don't remember, and nothing I do remember makes sense anymore. Jonas called out from the other corner of the room. Jonas, there's another door here, but it's mechanical, like it's locked with a code. Amanda approached and looked at the door. There was a circular mechanism embedded in the stone. It had a clock symbol, symbols, and 12 digits. Holtz took the clock in his hand. He murmured quietly, Holtz, those who keep time cannot pass without facing it. He read the inscription on the back of the clock. When the clock strikes midnight, the real door opens. Amanda, but the clock has stopped. Holtz, perhaps it's waiting for time to start again. Holtz began turning the mechanism. Jonas narrowed his eyes. Jonas, this is a ritual. It's not about the number, it's about the moment. Holtz set the hour and minute hands of the clock to midnight. Suddenly, the stone wall trembled. The mechanism began to turn. It was as if not the clock, but the building's memory had come to life. The wall slowly parted. The door led into darkness. But this darkness was not frightening. It was inviting. It was as if it was saying, "Come," to Holtz. When they entered, there was a table in the middle of the room. On it was an antique projector and old film reels. Jonas examined the device. Jonas, this is manual. It doesn't require electricity. Holtz placed the reel. Amanda turned the projector toward the wall. Holtz turned the crank. The film began to roll. The first image projected onto the screen. A hall, people in the middle, wearing symbolic clothing, and a man speaking, John Harrow. Time is not a power, but a responsibility. You cannot bend it, but you can talk to it, and speaking sometimes means silencing it. The film was silent, but every frame spoke volumes. The image changed. Harrow turned to someone resembling Holtz and handed him a watch. Jonas, startled. You're him. Amanda, so this isn't a moment recorded in the past, perhaps a reminder left for the future. Holtz's voice trembled. Holtz, at the beginning of time, perhaps we were there, but we don't remember it. When the film ended, the room fell silent. All 3 were left with the same question. What were they really in? An investigation? A game? Or fate? Holtz scanned the room one last time. In a corner, a small table. On it, a new envelope. Holtz opened it. You're just beginning. Time isn't just measured, it watches you too. J. H. His eyes filled with tears. Harrow was still alive, maybe far away, maybe close by, but he was still watching him. The morning light finally reached Brooklyn. When Holtz, Amanda, and Jonas stepped outside the library, the clocks had started ticking again. Time had decided to flow once more, but they were no longer ordinary people. They were no longer just living time. They were speaking with it. End of chapter 1, to be continued.